You know him, the man of 1,000 faces, man of 1,000 haircuts. But no matter what it is, it's beautiful. This man's a handsome man. That's all I'm going to say. Mr. Paul Hudrick, Liberty Ballers. What's up, Paulie?
I'm just over here living the dream, Mark. And yes, listen. So recently I got told the look kind of looks like Bradley Cooper from A Star Is Born. So how on earth am I going to cut that knowing with that knowledge in my head?
Man. You know. All right, Paul, repeat after me. Tell me something, girl. Now you. All right, no, I'm sorry. All right, anyway.
Good.
Are you tired? All right, anyway. So there's this little award that was given away. And I don't know if you know about this. It's a regular season award. I didn't know that. Called MVP. It's the most valuable player in the NBA, and the NBA is obviously that sport, that league that you cover so well for Liberty Ballers, of course, Paul. I don't want to hate on Jokic. I don't hate him. I just hate that he has won the award each of the last 2 years. Last year, I get the participation trophy. This year, I don't get it. Is this one of these things that you look at as someone who watches the entire league a lot more intently than most other people and go, yeah, this doesn't make sense to me either. How does Joker win over Joel Embiid?
A few things. One, I'm glad that you pointed out first because I'm with you. Like, I take nothing away from how great of a player Nikola Jokic is because he is a great player. One of the best players on the planet.
Yeah, but don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. I hate him now.
but you know, and of course I have inherent bias. I cover the Philadelphia 76ers. I watch Joel Embiid every single night. I've seen his growth. I was covering the team when he was sitting out with navicular bone injuries, and he was just kind of like this mythological figure off in the distance, working out in the dusty gym at PCOM. Like, so all of that, like, of course, like I am going to have some inherent bias. But with that said, yes, I do believe that Joel Embiid should have won the MVP. Last year, like you said, I understood it because I thought all things being equal, Jokic played every game. And again, that's not taking anything away from Jokic because he was great. He had an MVP season. He deserved it last year. I had no issues with that. We move on. This year, I think offensively, you have to say they are both remarkably, historically dominant in their own ways. They go about it a different way. They do some different things. They're both big men, but they both play a different style, but both dominant, very dominant. Again, historically dominant. You look at, all the advanced metrics and Nikola Jokic is, the best in like across the board. But Joel Embiid also won the scoring title. First center to do that since Shaquille O'Neal in 2000. First center to average over 30 since Moses Malone. That's a pretty big deal. I think like the whole context thing, sure. Jokic was missing Murray, missing Michael Porter Jr. Terrific players. I get that. It's not like Joel Embiid was surrounded by a bunch of all-stars all season long, with all due respect to Tyrese Maxey having a really excellent sophomore season. He's still a 21-year-old in a sophomore season. Tobias Harris had a bit of a down year, I think you admit, even though he's been terrific in the playoffs. Danny Green, who was so good for them last year, really, again, good in the playoffs, but was not so good in the regular season. He was hurt, banged up. Furkan Korkmaz took a big step back. Go up and down the list. And then, of course, everything that drug on with the Ben Simmons saga. He did not have – it's not like he was surrounded by this flush of talent. So I think, to me, that's a push. I think the records were close enough. Their seedings were close enough. That's a push. They both – I think Jokic played in maybe 6 more games. Push. I think the separator, Mark, is the defensive end of the floor. Nikola Jokic, vastly improved. I take nothing away from how great of a player he is, how much he improved on that end of the floor. But I think when you watch Joel Embiid play defense, you watch Nikola Jokic play defense, it's evident one is better than the other. And it's so bizarre to me, Mark, that a guy that's been a finalist for Defensive Player of the Year, that's made the all-defensive second team 3 times over, suddenly now is underrated on the defensive end of the floor because he's won a scoring title. Like, you see it, and I get it's a regular season award. We're not counting the postseason. I get all that.
Right.
But I think when you see the defensive impact Joel Embiid is making in this series compared to what Jokic did against the Warriors, and I get it. It is a regular season, but there is no circumstance in the world you could throw out 5 guards where Joel Embiid would be taken off the floor in a do or die game late for a defensive substitution for a late game possession. There is no circumstance in the world where Joel Embiid would be taken out. We see him locking up Victor Oladipo and Tyler Hero on the perimeter. And again, I'm not at all crushing Nikola Jokic. I just think you see those two players side by side playing defense, and one is better than the other. That's it. That's it.
Yeah, I could not agree more. I could not agree more. What I need to know is from you has this award taken a bit of a hit? And I know that's a huge insult to Nikola Jokic and all that stuff, but the MVP for me has taken a huge step back as to what it used to mean at the NBA level. Like, Giannis certainly has deserved it. I thought he deserved his last 2 MVP awards. You can also talk about Steph Curry just continuously winning the award as well. Steph Curry, to me, like Jokic winning these last 2 years with Embiid playing as well. I understand last year at least because of availability, but this year to me it just leaves me scratching my head. So has the MVP award of the NBA depreciated in value in your mind?
I think that might be a little bit of an overstatement because,
to
me, I look at it like this. I actually think even saying it's a snub is a little strong in my personal view.
Okay.
But in my opinion, Joel Embiid should have won it, and I am disappointed that he did not. That's where I'm at. Because, no, but seriously, like
that is such a proper way to put it.
Any of those 3 guys that, whether it was Jokic, whether it was Embiid, whether it was Giannis, like any of those 3 guys, like they all had MVP. Like we're not going to look back on this 20 years from now and say like if any of those 3 guys would have won it, this wouldn't have been something like I know a lot of people always bring up the Steve Nash, Kobe Bryant year and all that. Like this would not be that. Like it won't be that. I really feel that way with all due respect to Joel Embiid. I don't think it will be that way. I personally, and I think a lot of people in the Philadelphia area will look back and say, man, this is a damn shame that this guy had these 2 dominant seasons and got nothing from a personal award standpoint out of it. Totally. I get that. But I don't want to say it's been depreciated too, because the other thing is, Mark, I feel like LeBron, there was some voter fatigue with him when he was so great and the best player in the league.
Yeah.
You probably, like, I've seen people say, like, in his prime, you probably could have given it to him every single year because he was that good. But there was just a little bit of voter fatigue. I think some people wish there maybe would have been a little voter fatigue this year, but there wasn't. So no, I wouldn't go as far as to say it's depreciated. Would I be open to some different ideas as far as the way the voting is done? Sure. I would be open to that. I think because of our inherent biases, even if we're not like, we're obviously as reporters, we're reporting objectively, reporting on what we're seeing. We're not reporting, we're not doing it with a slant, but I watch Joel Embiid every night. I watch a lot of Nikola Jokic, but I don't watch him every single night. I don't watch Giannis Antetokounmpo every single night.
All right.
I personally think that local reporters should be out. That's just my personal opinion. So I would be definitely game for the voting, the way the voting is done, changing.
Okay. Here's, I think, the most fair way to put it in terms of why I feel like this award has been depreciated. It's never been so much about the regular season. Like, you've never had to be reminded up until recently, it's a regular season award. That to me is more diminishing and belittling of the prize than anything, because the MVP of the NBA, yes, we know it's for the regular season, but that guy's supposed to be able to do damage in the postseason. Like, that's why a guy like Giannis, I totally have every, like, if he would have won it over Joker, I'd be like, it's friggin' Giannis, man. What are you going to do? And it's a freak. What are you going to do? But I think because we're reminded so many times and it's drilled into our heads, it's a regular season award. It's like, yeah, but isn't that MVP supposed to be the guy that carries a team in the postseason, possibly to a conference championship, possibly to an NBA final, possibly to an NBA title as well? Like, that to me is kind of what I feel like, God, I hate to use this phrase, but like we grew up on with a guy like Michael Jordan and people experienced when LeBron James went to the Miami Heat. Like, that to me is kind of what makes it the most valuable player. It goes beyond the regular season.
It's fair. I mean, listen, Jokic has taken his team to a conference final. He has done that in the past. He clearly didn't do it this year, didn't do it the year before that.
Right.
And I think it's a fair point to be made. I think Steven Jackson made that point where he basically said, like, if your team doesn't have a chance to win a title, you probably shouldn't win MVP. And in Jokic's case, I don't think anybody looked at that Denver team and thought they had any remote chance of even getting past the first round, let alone making it to a conference final, to a championship.
I didn't hear that. That's a great point. Yeah.
So I get it. Like, I think, like, it's funny because, like, I can't argue with you because I agree with the fact that I think Joel Embiid should have won it. So, like, I can't argue with that. But it's just, and like there is just like weirdness to me because, and maybe this is me just being too much online and too much on Twitter, but like the people who defend Jokic, like, man, it's gone to a weird place where it's like he's their child or something. Like it's been taken to such an extreme with him where it's like, oh well, the playoffs don't count. Oh well, here's his VORP, and like, you know, but his defensive metrics are so great, and it's like, man, like you guys, like really, like the defense of him is just. It's reached another level. And I do think too, Mark, I'll say this, and this is why I would be on board with the voting process perhaps being overhauled.
Okay.
I still think there are a lot of people in the media, and clearly not everybody, and clearly not even the majority, just some that didn't like the process, like the actual process when it was carried out.
Yeah.
And they didn't care for Joel Embiid when he first got into the league because they thought he was brash and immature. And I think some people still hold that against him. And what does he have to do to shake that? I don't know. But I do think we'll see when the votes come out. Like it might have been a blowout. Maybe Jokic won by a lot and that doesn't matter. But if it's close and there were a few people that were like, that was kind of their thing. Like, well, Nikola Jokic is very likable and he's very humble and blah, 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 blah. But we remember Joel Embiid, you know, he was tweeting, he had more tweets than minutes and all that fun stuff when people were saying stuff like that. Like this guy is not that guy anymore. This is a different player, a different person. And I hate that I feel like some of that stuff is still being held against him. I think that's totally unfair.
Yeah, he's Arthur's dad. And this is the best version of Joel Embiid we've seen. Arthur's dad, man. It's a whole new ball game. Like I've read your stuff for years. Once you became Miles' dad, man, boom, you went a whole new level. So all right, let's change the subject because now I'm just gonna start crying. But anyway, when it comes to that James Harden fella. This was the first game he scored 25 points in the playoffs in his last 13 playoff games. So he broke that trend, which is nice. How confident are you that we'll see something close to this even as the playoffs continue with the Sixers?
I think we'll see something close to this again. I don't think we will see it every night. I just think that seems unrealistic. I'll say what it makes me feel like is, and you and I have discussed this before, this is a guy that a year ago in Brooklyn looked like an MVP candidate. That's not hyperbole. Like that's legit. Like he looked like an MVP candidate when he arrived in Brooklyn a year ago. It wasn't that. I know it feels really long ago for all of us because of everything we've lived through as Sixers people, you know, with Ben Simmons, with the loss of the Hawks, with everything that has followed. But it was a year ago that this guy looked like this. So I don't think that it just has magically gone away. I think that hamstring is still nagging him at times and still bothering him at times. And I think in moments, in spurts, that guy that we saw last night comes out because he feels good enough to have, you know what I mean? Like, I think he feels up to it and it can come out in spurts. Is that good enough to propel them to, you know, beyond this round? I do think so. And not only that, Mark, I think him being the point guard, and Doc Rivers has said this too, and I tend to agree, him being the point guard is bigger because you look at where the Sixers have failed in recent playoff runs. Their half-court offense sucked, just flat out. It was bad. With Ben Simmons as the point guard, their half-court offense was bad. Now you have James Harden, who is, whatever you want to say about where he is as a scorer, is still a world-class passer, elite, has elite vision, and can make things happen and create shots for others. You have a Tyrese Maxey who could create in the half court and go off on any given night. So with those elements, all of a sudden, your half court offense went from being bad, like flat out bad, to now really dangerous. When you have a guy like James Harden, who at any point, like again, it's not going to happen every night, but on a given night could score 16 points in the fourth quarter and, against great defense, because Miami was great in the fourth quarter defensively. He was just better offensively. So when you have multiple guys, whether it's Harden, whether it's Maxey, whether it's Joel Embiid, who can just beat good defense, that makes your half-court offense really tough to stop. And I think that's where I am with James Harden. I don't expect it every night, but I expect that it is there at times. And I think him playing that point guard role, if Maxey continues to be, have his moments and be really good, if Joel Embiid can regain his offensive form just like a little bit, him being that point guard can be good enough to get them through to the next round and maybe beyond.
All right. When it comes to that guy we were just talking about as our MVP, at least, Joel Embiid, how much better can he be? I know he's not going to get wave a magic wand and all of a sudden be healthy, but how much better can he get as this playoff series and hopefully this playoff run continues?
Well, what Doc said last night, and I agree, is we haven't seen the best of him yet. It's only been 2 games. We haven't seen the best of him in this series because, first of all, he's just got so much stuff working against him. The thumb, which he had just gotten used to at the end of the Toronto series, he almost has to get re-used to that. He didn't play. He didn't do anything for a week, right? He didn't run. He didn't do anything basketball-wise. So he's still getting his rhythm back, and he's still getting his conditioning back. And on top of all of that, he has a giant mask on his face because his face is broken. So all of these things, you would have to think they're going to get better, right? It was at its worst when he had to play the first game 3 with the mask, with the thumb, out of shape, just clearing concussion protocol, just getting his rhythm back. That was the worst of it, I feel like. So I just feel like as the games go on, as he gets used to all of these ailments and he's able to kind of rise above them, I think he's just going to gradually get better and better offensively. Now, defensively, he's been a maven. He's been ridiculous. He has been incredible on that end of the floor. And I think that is what has changed the tide of the series. And that's why we're tied at 2-2, because him defensively is so good and all of the injuries have been, upstairs and not downstairs. So his legs, he looks great. He's moving really well. And it's changed everything the Sixers do defensively and how they defended the Heat. So I anticipate, offensively, there's more coming, but defensively, he's already been stellar.
I agree with that. Absolutely. When it comes to winning this series, what's your gut telling you there, Paul Hudrick?
I think they're going to win the series. And I wouldn't be surprised if they win the next 2 games because I think for a bunch of reasons. One, the on-the-court boost they've gotten from Joel Embiid, and then the emotional boost. When you have your guy, your best player, your emotional leader, playing with a broken face and a torn ligament in his thumb, coming off concussion protocol to help this team win, how does that not galvanize and rally everyone else to say, all right, this guy's doing this. We all need to step our games up. We all need to be at our best because this is what he is sacrificing for all of us. So I think that's a big part of it. I think it seems like the first team that shoots well on the road is going to win the series. And I feel like that's going to be the Sixers. I feel like maybe they won't, they've shot the lights out the last 2 nights in Philly. They don't need to do that, but I think they can be, certainly much better than they were in games 1 and 2 in Miami because Joel Embiid is his presence has taken those good shots they got in Miami and he made them great with his presence. So now those shots are even better, even cleaner. And then on top of that, I think Bam Adebayo went nuts in those first 2 games because he was going up against DeAndre Jordan. Right. It's clearly a different ballgame when you got to go up against Joel Embiid. I think Tyler Hero on top, again, he's a really good player and he still might have, something to say in this series. But with Joel Embiid in the lineup, now they can trap him. They can hedge much harder on him in those pick and rolls. And it's made life much more difficult for him the last 2 games. So I think that's a factor. And then you touched on it. Now, James Harden looking like he's going to come alive a little bit, hopefully. And I look at the balance the Sixers have right now. Tobias Harris had 27 points in the game. So Tyrese Maxey's already had a 30-plus game. James Harden's had a 30-plus game. The most Joel Embiid has scored is 24, so we're still waiting for his big game. Whereas the Heat, I feel like Jimmy Butler, who has been he's been a madman the last 2 games, he has to be that in order for them to win when the Sixers are at full strength. And he could do it, Sure. But someone else has to step up too. And I think the Sixers are going to do some things differently too against Jimmy Butler. I think they need to stop guarding him so aggressively at the 3-point line. If he's going to take 10 threes, have at it. If he makes 5 of them, you tip your cap. If that's how you lose, you almost guard him like Giannis. Like, don't let him get into the paint. Don't let him create for himself and others. Keep him out past the 3-point line. I think that's the way you need to defend him going forward. But I just think with all of that and all the momentum they have, I think they have a chance to win in Miami, and then coming home in Game 6, I think they'd have a real good shot to close them out.
Love it. Paul, what do you guys have cooking up over there at Liberty Ballers?
So we got a bunch of stuff. The stuff I just touched on with the idea of, the Heat are a very deep team, but I think the Sixers have shown that they're a more balanced team. And I think that might be what catapults them into winning the series, if they can win the series. Plenty of stuff on James Harden going forward, of course. And, like I touched on as well, how do you stop Jimmy Butler? What can they do? What changes can they make to do that? And then, of course, Joel Embiid and his defensive impact and what he's meant to them and what he can mean to them going forward. All that, we're covering all that. Written, podcast, the whole 9, you name it. We got it covered.
Tell me something, girl. That's all I'm going to be thinking about now for the rest of the day. Thanks so much. Paul Hudrick, Liberty Ballers. My friend, it's always great catching up with you. Thanks so much.
Of course, Mark. Anytime, man.
Paul Hudrick joining us on the Rothman Orthopaedics guest line.